Wonderful. Thank you, Veronica. And we will go ahead and get started in our webinar now that we've gotten all of the logistics down and everyone knows how to say hello to us and let us know if we're doing a good job or not. We appreciate that. Just a little bit of background about the AEBG TAP project. It is a project that is funded through the AEBG office, and the Sacramento County Office of Education is the current grant holder for this project, and AAR is one of 3 partners working towards making sure that the field is prepared and supported with the technical assistance that they need. And specifically, our role within the AEBG TAP project, the Technical Assistance Project, is to make sure that we are offering effective instruction in the variety of program areas, supporting you in aligning your curriculum and making sure that students have seamless transitions. And then what you see bold today is our goal is to support learner, college, and career readiness, as well as develop exemplary leaders. And these are both critical and important to the work that we're doing around work-based learning. So, as I shared earlier, we have some phenomenal presenters, and they each gave me their bio, and I don't want to take up a great amount of time sharing all of the details, so I'll try and hit some highlights. As you hear them this afternoon, you'll see their expertise and their knowledge and skill set. But I will start with my colleague, Ellen Cushing, who also works with the American Institutes for Research, and she has been working as a provider of technical assistance at the national, state, and local level for over a decade. She is currently the Deputy Director of the College and Career Readiness and Success Center, which some of you might have heard of. And a part of the work that she's leading is focusing on education to workforce pipeline. Let's see, Eric Pomeroy and Doug Criddle are pictured there together in the next slide. And Eric is the Director of College and Career Readiness for Sutter County Schools and oversees the Sutter County Adult Education and the STREAM California Career Pathways Trust Grant. He's a part of the Northern California Adult Education Consortium and has over 22 years of experience in education. And his colleague also from Sutter County Schools and the Northern California Adult Education Consortium, Doug Criddle, has over 20 years of educational experience, but also a critical role in his perspective as a business owner, a filmmaker, and also a member with over 30 businesses serving in either an advisory or board member capacity. Then we have Frank Gerdeman, and Frank is coming to us as the Director of Advance, which is the Lake Tahoe Adult Education Consortium. There, Frank has been working to serve the southern region of the Tahoe Basin. And Frank has about 18 years of experience in adult education. Prior to coming to South Lake Tahoe, he was the Director of Adult Education for the state of Vermont. And in that capacity, he oversaw adult ed, CTE, assessments, and Title III. And then finally, Hayden Springer. Hayden serves as the manager of the Foundation for California Community Colleges Workforce Development Team, and she oversees a variety of workforce learning programs as well as supports the strategic planning and partnership development efforts. Right now, she's overseeing 32 work-based learning planning and tools pilots, and the goal of these pilots is to build the capacity so that we can help increase student access to quality work-based learning opportunities. I know I went through those quickly, but I don't want to delay us getting right into this amazing content. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen Cushing, who is going to get us started with setting the context. Ellen. And Ellen, if you have started, you are mute. We are not hearing you yet. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Yes. All right, great. Well, thank you, Charisse, and thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to speak with you today. As Charisse mentioned, I have been working on a multi-state work-based learning initiative over the past year and a half, and I'm really excited to share some of the work that we're learning through this effort with you all today. Before I get into that content, I just wanted to start the context a little. You've probably seen some version of this graphic somewhere in your work. This particular one comes from the Center on Education and the Workforce at Georgetown University. And while the specific numbers may vary based on the state or the region within a state or even the industry that we're talking about, the general point, the overall point is really the same. And that's that increasingly jobs of the future are requiring some form of post-secondary education. And we are currently predicting that we are going to be able to fill a good portion of those jobs. And just when we speak about post-secondary education, we really are talking about anything that happens after high school. So that can be a career or technology credential, an associate's degree, an undergraduate four-year degree, or even an advanced degree. So if we're thinking about what this new world of work is going to look like, we really need to ensure that all students have access to these opportunities. And one way that we can ensure that that access is available to all students is to appropriately align our education to workforce pipeline. So what does our current pipeline look like? The good news is that high school graduation rates, as I'm sure you're all aware of, are increasing and have been increasing over the past decade. And even though those rates are somewhat lower for specific populations of students like English learners or those that might be economically disadvantaged, really the trajectory is that high school graduation rates are increasing over the years. But when we look at if students are ready to access the post-secondary content, we're seeing a slightly different story. So here you can see the post-secondary remediation rates for students that are going into post-secondary institutions. And those that might enter into a four-year institution, about 20% require some form of remediation. And those that are entering into a two-year institution, just over 50% are actually requiring some remediation. They're not quite ready to access the coursework that's expected of them. And then if we look sort of further down that pipeline at the graduation rates for post-secondary, you see that about 60% of students that enter into a four-year institution graduate within 6 years. And those numbers, again, are lower for specific populations of students, like African American students graduating at about 41% and Hispanic students at 54%. So really what you're seeing is that the trajectory being that students are having trouble accessing content when they enter into post-secondary, and then they're not completing their post-secondary degrees. But how does this pipeline sort of translate into our workforce needs? What you can see here is information that comes from the National Skills Coalition and shows sort of this disconnect between our education preparedness and our workforce needs. Here you can see that we're projecting to overproduce workers with low skills, or those that might just have a high school diploma or less, and we're projecting to overproduce high-skill workers, those with a four-year degree or higher. But where we see this opportunity, this biggest opportunity, is really in these middle skills jobs, which require some form of post-secondary education, but not quite a full four-year degree. So this could include some sort of specialized training or job training or technical skills, again, but not a full four-year degree. So this is really where we're seeing some opportunities for the education to workforce alignment. Now, if we want to create these opportunities for students, we really need to ensure that they're ready to access the labor market, the workforce requirements that is required for job readiness and preparedness. So one strategy that we're seeing states and districts and students engage in to be prepared for the workforce needs is work-based learning. And it's really, work-based learning is really an opportunity for students to be provided authentic learning opportunities, to explore potential jobs, apply academic and technical knowledge in a real-world setting, and develop and demonstrate really these crucial employability skills or workplace skills that we know that workers need. But if we want these opportunities to be truly meaningful, we need to ensure that they are actually quality work-based learning opportunities. And so the remainder of my presentation will sort of identify some key factors or indicators in how to ensure that the work-based learning opportunities are truly quality for students. Before I go into that content, though, I want to switch to our first polling question, which is just going to help us get some information from you all about where you are in your work-based learning journey. So if you could just take a minute and answer this question here about where you currently are in implementing quality work-based learning opportunities for your students. Are you sort of at the knowledge development stage, the planning stage, implementation, or sustaining? We'll just take a minute and have you respond to those. Okay, I see that we have a good response rate so far, maybe just 10 more seconds. And if you're in, I see Estella, you're saying that you're in 2 stages at once. If you want to just pick a stage that you feel like you're in today, maybe, just feel free to respond to the poll that way. Great. Okay. Well, so it looks like there was a pretty even mix between those who are in the knowledge development stage and those that are in the implementation stage. And then we have one who's focusing on monitoring and continuously improving. So that's great. That's really helpful information for us just to know sort of where you are in this process, and helps us sort of tailor our comments moving forward. So thank you. Great. So let's just kind of dive into this work a little bit deeper. So we want to discuss some of the key indicators for creating quality work-based learning experiences. So there's really 4 overarching indicators that I'm going to be talking about for the remainder of my part of the presentation. The first indicator is really ensuring that you have a common definition of what work-based learning is. The second is establishing measures of quality. The third is around ensuring that the needs of businesses are integrated into work-based learning. And the fourth is around creating specific supports that help educators provide and facilitate quality work-based learning. And what I'll do is just sort of describe each of these indicators from a national context, provide some California-specific context, and then close out each of these indicators with some considerations that you might want to think about or plan for as you implement your own work-based learning opportunities. So let's begin with just the first one here, defining work-based learning. So work-based learning really does require the coordination of a lot of different agencies and stakeholders. You can have the state education agencies or local education agencies, departments of workforce, have governors' offices, departments of labor, local workforce investment boards, higher education, national organizations, the general public. There's sort of a lot of folks who need to be brought to the table when you're thinking about developing and implementing and providing work-based learning experiences for students. And the tricky part with all of these different stakeholders is that they all sort of have a different terminology, different jargon, different objectives. And so making sure that these different stakeholders sort of have a common understanding of what work-based learning is not only helps you communicate amongst each other as you're trying to coordinate and provide supports, but also so that as students are talking about their work-based learning experiences, there's this sort of common understanding of what that experience actually means for future employers or for future collaborations. So recently the College and Career Readiness and Success Center, which is a federally funded technical assistance center, conducted a national scan of what different states are, or how different states are defining work-based learning. And they looked not only at state education agencies, but also at departments of labor and departments of workforce to sort of see how these different definitions do or do not align even within states. And so what was found is that there are about 28 formal definitions of work-based learning that states have adopted. Of those, 22 require that there is workplace experience by the student. 9 specifically require that the experience focuses on developing professional skills. 16 focus on developing knowledge or technical skills. 4 are required to be connected to a career pathway, and 4 include payment requirements. And one of the things that was really interesting about this analysis is that oftentimes, which might not be surprising, but the Department of Education and the Department of Labor and Workforce would have 2 very different definitions of what work-based learning might be. So this is really sort of one of the reasons that we wanted to highlight sort of this first indicator of quality, which is creating this common definition. And I want to just take a quick segue for those on the phone, because I know that oftentimes we, even in this field, folks who are very familiar, sort of use the terms of work-based learning and pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships sort of interchangeably. And so I thought it might be helpful just to have a quick slide that sort of breaks these 3 down so that we are, at least on this phone, sort of practicing what we're preaching and creating this common definition. But for work-based learning, what we're really talking about is sort of this sequence set of activities, this continuum of experiences that really expose students to the world of work, but does not necessarily pigeonhole them or focus them within a specific career trajectory. It also focuses on developing key knowledge and skills, and oftentimes, actually, what we're talking about is sort of this end of the continuum, really around the career training piece, or the learning for work. Related but slightly different is the concept of pre-apprenticeships. So this is obviously a concept that is very closely tied to registered apprenticeship programs. It's much more focused on a particular pathway or a particular industry or particular job that the student is going to be exploring or already has committed to. And there's this dual focus on both industry training and classroom instruction. And then finally, this concept of apprenticeship. So this is a very highly structured, employer-led system that, again, connects classroom education with hands-on job training. And a key component of that is that you are earning while you're learning is in this particular industry. So I just wanted to sort of have that quick segue, because I think that it's helpful to sort of have this common definition of work-based learning, particularly as we're going through the rest of these indicators. So in California, there's actually a couple of different definitions that we were able to find, and you probably have other definitions that you are working with from your own perspectives or have seen other definitions, so this is not meant to be exhaustive, but is really just, again, to show you that there are some differences in how different agencies and different departments might define work-based learning, and so sort of reinforcing the need to make sure that there is this common definition that you all are using. So here you can see in the exploratory work experience that this really focuses on observations and sort of exploring opportunities for work. It's non-paid, but there is some related classroom instruction. Here there's the general work experience education. Again, it's supervised, it's paid, it's thinking about the purposeful application of skills. And then the Department of Industrial Relations also has another definition, which is very closely tied to the apprenticeship definitions, which is being driven by industry and focuses on instruction and developing skills. So the good news is that, as I mentioned, there's a lot of definitions out there, both within California and elsewhere, and so there's no need to sort of reinvent the wheel and develop your own from scratch, but rather think about what are other agencies and departments and stakeholder groups using, and thinking about how they not only could be leveraged to develop your own definition, but also help develop an understanding amongst yourselves about how different stakeholders might interpret the term work-based learning and create some opportunities for creating common language amongst your stakeholders. Another consideration is just thinking about how business and industry in particular, how they define work-based learning and some of what their expectations are for a work-based learning experience. That as you develop your definition, you can sort of fold that and integrate that into your definition. And then finally, once you have your definition, being very purposeful and thoughtful about how you communicate that with other stakeholders, including students, educators, guardians, parents, business leaders, etc. So that's the first consideration, that's the first indicator of quality around creating a common definition. What I'm going to do now is just move into the second, which is really focused on sort of once you have your measures of your definitions of work-based learning, what are some measures that you might consider to ensure that what you're doing through your work-based learning efforts are actually having the impact and the outcomes that you would expect work-based learning to have. And so what we do here, or what I'm going to do here, is sort of break it down into 3 different buckets. And this is really 3 buckets that are what we consider sort of decision points that you should all be discussing or considering as you're thinking about what measures are appropriate for your particular work-based learning system. There's a lot of different options out there and a lot of different strategies that we're seeing different entities use. So it's hard to say this is the measure to use for work-based learning, but really your measures should reflect what your overall objectives are for your work-based learning system. And the first question to determine what the measures that would be appropriate are is to first figure out what you want to measure. So you can think about it from the lens of the student or the quality of the student. So this would be a measure of what they've done through their program, such as the development of some personal characteristics. Are they able to accomplish certain job tasks that you would expect them to be able to accomplish? Maybe the student or a student with a mentor or a student with a leader in their program has identified some goals that they might want to develop over time, so they might have accomplished those mutually identified goals. Or it might be if they're able to apply specific academic content and technical content into a workplace setting. So you can either think about it from sort of what the student has been able to demonstrate, or you could also think about it from the quality of the experience, so more from the lens of the employer or the work-based setting that that experience is taking place in. So examples of this could be, does the employer give tasks that are really helping the student apply that academic and technical content? Are they providing some development support for the student to really help them make this a meaningful opportunity? Or are they just sort of hiring someone for a work-based learning experience, but really just putting them on the phones and not really allowing them to develop that academic, technical, and employability skills that we know are so necessary? So you can think about it from a couple of different angles. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, but just being sure that you sort of have an understanding of what you want to measure is sort of the first step in determining what measures are most appropriate. Once you've sort of articulated what you want to measure, you can sort of move to how you want to measure it. And there's a whole, like I said, a host of measures that are out there and available that you can beg, borrow, and steal from, but some include employer evaluations, so employers complete evaluations of students that are in the program. It could be a rubric, it could be a student self-assessment or some self-reflection opportunities. It could be sort of a portfolio of different artifacts that a student has collected over a period of time that are scored and ranked. There's some other options that we're seeing, but sort of think about how that once you determine what you want to measure, how it's best measured, and then who will do the measuring. So is it, again, something that students will do themselves? Is there an employer expectation that they'll do the measuring or the assessing of the activities of students? Is it teachers or even intermediary organizations? So sort of working through these 3 types of questions can really help you identify what's going to be the most appropriate measure for your work-based learning experience. And similar to the definitions analysis that the CCRS, or the College and Career Readiness Center, did previously, they've also recently done an analysis of what different measures are out there, and so looked at about 109 different resources that are currently being used, and saw that the majority of them are using employer completed evaluations. There's a lot of districts and states using rubrics and self-assessment, self-reflection items, but sort of there's a lot of different resources, again, that are already out there that can be modified or at least used to begin to develop your own measures. And even in California, there are some existing resources available. So here is an example pulled from the Work Experience Education Guide, which is a resource from the California Department of Education. And this first resource is, as you can see, sort of a rubric that would be completed by an employer or some work-based learning observer. And there's a series of indicators or characteristics that the student would be evaluated on, sort of on a 3-point scale. Pretty standard, pretty pretty easily available. Another resource that could be part of perhaps a portfolio would be, there's an example in this guide for a student log, so students can sort of track the different, the amount of time that they've been in their work-based learning experience. And then the third is, again, another resource that could be adopted or adapted to be more of a rubric or a portfolio, but it's a series of commitments that different stakeholders must agree to as part of their work-based learning experience. And so here, if you can see that in the tiny print, there are some expectations for students, there's expectations for guardians, for employers, for the work experience coordinator. So each of these stakeholders have a different set of obligations that they must fulfill as part of their work-based learning experience. And so again, it's just another piece that could be used that's already out there for thinking through what are some of the expectations for around a quality work-based learning experience. So as you're thinking about some measures for work-based learning from your perspective, there are some things, in addition to those sort of 3 decision points that I went through, some other considerations that might be helpful to think through as you're thinking about measures. So the first is thinking through the purpose of assessing work-based learning. So if you have high-stakes accountability, for example, for your work-based learning experience, the measures that you would choose would obviously have be different than if you were thinking about it from more of a formative type of perspective. It's also important to think about how you balance the measurement piece without overburdening key stakeholders. So again, if you're thinking about employers, for example, being the ones who conduct the evaluation, how can you use an evaluation that wouldn't be overly burdensome so that they wouldn't want to be that partner? And then, thinking through, again, if this is being used from a high-stakes perspective, what type of training or support would be necessary to ensure that there is some calibration or inter-rater reliability amongst these measures so that there is some sort of equity amongst the scores that would be produced from work-based learning. So just thinking through sort of what's the overall purpose and how that purpose might affect different decisions as well. So with that, I'd love to launch our second polling question, which again would just be really helpful for us to get a better sense of what's happening in the field with you all specifically. So if you can just take a minute and write in your response. It's not a multiple choice question like the first one, but just take a minute and share sort of how you're doing some of this coordination across key stakeholders. Great. Thank you, Carrie, for sharing a link to some of the standards and definitions that you've already developed. I think that's a great resource for others who are either beginning to think through that process. That would be a great resource to use, so thank you. maybe just a couple more minutes. I see there's a couple of folks that are still typing, so I don't want to cut this off, but thanks, Carrie. Okay. All right, Janet's sharing that they have an extensive CTE program, an advisory board that provides input, and students are evaluated by their supervisor. Great. Well, it sounds like there's a good mix of some examples that are already out there, but also some opportunities for other folks who might not be engaged in these conversations just yet to maybe think about how they could initiate or start some of these conversations to really get to this this work in a more collaborative and potentially common terminology, common definitions perspective. So thank you everyone for sharing. So now I just want to move to the third of the 4 indicators. So this one is really around ensuring that the needs of businesses are reflected in the work-based learning experience. So you might remember from my intro slides that we had sort of this, we call it internally this trifecta of skills that students are going to need for future readiness, for future workplace readiness. It's this sort of combination of academic, technical, and employability skills. And work-based learning is really this great opportunity to think about how students can have authentic opportunities to develop and demonstrate these skills, these academic, technical, and employability skills. But when we think about what's happening nationally, we really have a good both breadth of research, but also just it's one of the things that's most striking to me as I do this work around the country, that employers are consistently citing this need for employability skills specifically in workers. And so this idea that you know, we hear it a lot that we'll train them on the content. We know that the technology and the work is really changing so quickly over time that we just need people who are adaptable, who sort of have these critical thinking skills, these collaboration skills, this digital literacy, and that as long as they sort of come to us with these more employability skills at the ready, then we can really help them with the academic or the technical knowledge that they need for their jobs. And it's really underscored by the research that's coming out of the Hart Associates and Manpower Group, which are saying that these employability skills are really the most important skill for them, and that the lack of these employability skills are contributing to a talent shortage within these industries. And so really thinking about how, I'm sorry, I forgot about this slide. Again, trying to practice what I preach here, when I say employability skills, they go by a whole bunch of different names. They go by 21st century skills or soft skills. There's a whole bunch of different terms that are used. And I always say everyone has a different term, and no one likes that actual term. But it's really this idea of the general skills and knowledge that workers need in any profession and at any level. And so this framework here is the employability skills framework that comes from the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, OCTAE. And it sort of has these 3 domains of applied knowledge, effective relationships, and workplace skills, and then sort of branching off of each of those 3 domains, these specific skills that you would expect workers, students to be able to apply in a workplace setting, these employability skills. So that's what I mean when I say employability skills. But if we're really thinking about how we can integrate employers' needs into these work-based learning experiences, what we need to do is just think about how we can be sure that the experiences that we are providing for students are really aligned to what the labor market is asking of them. So not only these opportunities to develop these critical skills, but they're actually getting opportunities to work in industries that are emerging or priority industries, industries that are going to still be around in the next 3 to 5 years, so that they are employable and that they have an opportunity to have a meaningful work experience once they leave the post-secondary institution. So really thinking about state and regional labor market needs and understanding sort of what industry projections are, what labor markets are saying, and what employers are asking for should all be key information that's sort of collected and shared or used to inform work-based learning systems. And here is just a quick slide that I put together that sort of highlights some of the emerging and priority industries within California specifically. So again, as institutions yourselves on the phone, as you're thinking through how to create quality work-based learning systems, thinking about what are the emerging and priority industries within your regions and within your state is really important, because it will help sort of inform what types of relationships you might want to establish with different industries, and thinking through sort of that trifecta of academic, technical, and employability skills that would be really crucial for these different industries. And then, again, closing out this section, this third indicator of quality, what we have here are just some considerations for how you might consider reflecting business needs within your work-based learning systems. So again, thinking about the specific industries within your region or the region that you serve or that your students tend to go back to, understanding what those industries are looking for specifically in the talent that they recruit, considering how you might integrate some of the knowledge and skills into coursework or work-based learning experiences, and then also thinking about from the student's perspective, where are they interested in pursuing industry opportunities, and how can you think about creating relationships with those industries that students have identified as areas of interest. And now I'll just go into the fourth and final indicator of quality for work-based learning. And this is really all about that human capital talent, that human capital management piece. This is, we can have the best policies and the best programs and the best guidebooks and all of that developed and delivered, but if we don't have the staff on the ground who are really prepared and supported to do this work well, then really we're not going to have the impact that we're hoping to have through work-based learning. So really equally acknowledging and investing in the support for educators and staff is really critical to ensuring that the work-based learning experiences are high quality for everyone. So there's a whole bunch of research out there about what makes professional learning effective for educators. We know that it needs to be focused on something specific, it needs to be active, so there's opportunities to sort of learn but also apply and adapt. It needs to be collaborative, so not just done by an individual, but rather in a group, or opportunities to learn and collaborate amongst different colleagues. We also know that it needs to be ongoing. Just one time is not going to really change practice or help people apply new knowledge into their context. It needs to be ongoing, job embedded, and differentiated for the stakeholders that are attending. So there's a whole bunch of research out there about what effective professional learning means. And what that sort of translates to is this very rudimentary slide that I put together, which it's sort of how I think about it, but it's really this continuum of experiences where you have on sort of one end of the continuum, the far left end, you sort of have these professional learning opportunities that are lower effort to put together. It's more generalized content, but it really has sort of a lower impact on changing practice. And then at the other end of that continuum, you have sort of the higher effort types of professional learning to organize and coordinate and to deliver. It's much more personalized, but it also has the potential for a much higher impact in changing practice and supporting practice. So So you sort of have this continuum of support for educators in work-based learning, and then along that continuum, sort of different activities that might fall. This is not obviously an exhaustive list of different professional learning opportunities that exist, so I don't mean to imply that it is, but it's sort of just an idea to think about what types of professional learning activities do you currently offer your educators, and maybe think about really where they fall on this continuum and how you might really think through opportunities that exist on both ends. So there could be some opportunities for a guidebook or some virtual training, and coupling that with more intensive, higher effort, higher impact types of activities as well. So just sort of thinking about where your professional learning falls on this continuum will be helpful in sort of ensuring that you are at least considering some of those higher impact activities. And just to sort of close out with this section, and related to that is, thinking through some considerations for educators. How might you think about leveraging multiple modes of technical assistance to support educators? So similar to what I was just saying, there might be a great opportunity for a webinar that's about full content, and you just sort of want to get information out there, but that can be coupled with something that's maybe more in person, where participants have an opportunity to really apply what they're learning in a collaborative environment. So some knowledge delivery, but also coupled with more intensive, high-impact technical assistance and professional learning support. There's also a need to ensure that teachers really understand what employers are looking for. So sort of coupled with the third indicator of quality around business needs, ensuring that educators know what businesses are looking for, and maybe there's opportunities for teacher externships, maybe there's some opportunities for bringing professionals into the classroom or into professional development opportunities, but thinking through sort of these different considerations will really help ensure that the quality of the professional learning for educators can really help change and impact the types of work-based learning experiences you're hoping to have. So those are sort of the four overarching indicators of quality. I could talk about any of them for all day, and there's others to also consider, but sort of based on what we think are sort of the most important to think about to start, these were the four that we wanted to highlight. I do want to give us a chance to go to our last polling question, which is really an opportunity for us to see if there's specific areas that you'd like to learn more about, or if there's some more information that you'd like to be shared about either any of these indicators of quality that I just talked through, or anything that we didn't have a chance to talk through today. So please just take a minute and share that with us so that we have a better sense of where we might be able to support you most.
All right. So Ellen, I want to thank you for this great presentation, this great preparation for what we're about to look at in terms of some of the lessons learned from local programs. I see some folks are typing in the chat pod, and you can continue typing. We will start to move to our first program that we're going to hear from in terms of their lessons learned from the field. It will be Eric Pomeroy and Doug Criddle, and they are from the Northern California Adult Education Consortia. Here I see that you are still typing in there some things that you want us to continue to explore more and that you want to learn more about. Now that you can go ahead and change that, Veronica, now that that pod has been removed, if you have any other requests, we'll have you type those in the general chat pod here. Ellen, there was one question on where the data that you were sharing can be found. And if you want to provide us with a link to that, we can share that in the chat pod later. You can email us that, or sorry, type that in the presenters chat, and then Veronica or I will get it over to the general chat so that the participants can see where to access the great data that you shared. So again, thank you, Ellen. That was great. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Pomeroy and Doug Criddle. And Eric, I believe you're starting. So here's to you, Eric, and thank you very much.
That is correct. This is Eric. Thank you again, Sharice, for giving us the opportunity today. And thank you, Ellen, for sharing some of the wonderful resources, many of which we actually use and will be talking about today. I want to preface our discussion by sharing some information about our program. As Sharice said, Sutter County Adult Education is a member of the Northern California Adult Education Consortium, and we, similar to other programs, provide adult education, including adult secondary education, adult basic education, ESL, and CTE to students in Sutter and Yuba County. We partner directly with the Sutter County One Stop. This is what really makes our program unique is partnerships, because we actually oversee the CTE portion or educational portion of the Sutter County One Stop. So we're directly partnered with WIOA Title 1, 3, and 4, as well as 2, which we oversee. And then we oversee the Tri-County Regional Occupational Program, which is a 3-county ROP, the California Career Pathways Trust Grant, which is a 4-county consortium. And so through these partnerships, we are very well positioned to partner with employers. We have well over 800 employers in our network that help us really focus on providing career-based education to all of our students in adult ed and high school. Our program really is in Yuba City, located about 40 miles north of Sacramento. We're a very rural agricultural-based community, so statistically speaking, we have a challenging population, high unemployment rate, migrant population, because a lot of our work in the area is farm work. Large ELL population, larger than average high school dropout rate. So probably our biggest challenge here is keeping students in school. And one of the ways we do this is through targeted, and I stress targeted, work-based learning. And it's targeted in the sense that we engage students through work-based learning that is tied to their career goals and interests. Our orientation process is pretty thorough. Like many other programs, students will take the diagnostic and CASAS pre-assessment. Since we're connected to One Stop, they immediately enroll in CalJobs, meet with the WIOA resource specialist to identify needs and resources, and also a counselor to review transcripts. On the career side of our intake, all of our students take career-based assessments. We use virtual job shadow as one of our career-based assessments, which Doug will be talking about. And then also we use the California Career Resource Network, which is free, great resource if you're not familiar with it. After this, all of our students meet with a navigator. We have a navigator here. It's a regional navigator to discuss potential career interests, work history, and we formulate an initial career plan from there. Students are then enrolled in our required career planning and management course, where they research careers through exploratory learning and work-based learning. Students also in this class develop a portfolio towards the end of the course, and then all of our students actually enroll in a pathway at that point and participate in an unpaid internship. So on this first slide, notice the picture at the bottom of the slide. We actually forgot within the frame of the picture to add the word college and career readiness to illustrate that everything we do in our program revolves around college and career readiness. Ellen talked extensively about employability skills. So really, we tie all of the programs that we do into this. The standards for career ready practice, if you're not familiar with those, defined by the California Department of Education, are foundational to our program. Within this framework of career readiness, we actually have 4 components that we focus on to make our program successful here at Sutter County. These include relevant technical curriculum. And we say relevant because it has to be relevant to industry, up to date. It also has to be relevant to students. So our teachers use a lot of real-life scenarios with that update curriculum. We say rigorous academics because we really there are reinforcing the technical reading and writing, as well as the math, to make sure we address those skill gaps. Work-based learning is really at the heart of our program because it truly engages students, and it reinforces the relevancy, helps students learn by doing, really. And then the fourth thing is the personalized support system, which really gives the students the resources to be successful and stay in school. And I know Ellen talked about this extensively as well. So resources could be from financial to even mentoring. So we have mentoring here at Sutter County. So all of these components, again, are working together to ensure that our students are prepared to successfully transition to career college and work. So Ellen also talked about quality work-based learning, and again, these are things that we really ensure are in place to make sure our work-based learning program is successful. Our program, again, we talked about it in the last slide, focuses on college and career readiness. We want all of our students to be prepared to transition to a career, which really requires much more education and training, as we know. So our work-based learning is more focused on learning broader and ultimately higher level skills, especially in our capstone CTE programs. Our WBL, or work-based learning, as we talk about on the next slide, is never a standalone experience. It's really coordinated in a way that builds on prior knowledge and experience. And also through our work-based learning, we prepare our students to participate, especially in internship experiences. Employers and teachers really work together to define those student learning outcomes. And students are interviewed and prepared for this experience. It's not just, we just don't send them out to participate. We have certificates, actually, that we developed quite some time ago through our ROP program. So all of our programs have certificates. We define those student learning outcomes, as I said, with employers. Ellen also talked about evaluations. We have those as well. So our employers have the opportunity to evaluate students. Students have the opportunity to evaluate the experience. So we have feedback. Ultimately, we really start with employers because really they are the end game in this. And as I said, I think partnerships are the key to making this work. Without partnerships and partnerships across the community, employers, school districts, this is a very difficult task to make work well. On this next slide, I'm not sure if you can see this very well because I can't see it very well, but I'm half blind here. So there is a handout, I believe, that we included in this. Really, this is another continuum that Ellen had presented. It's a continuum, again, that we really use to explain this work-based learning process to our stakeholders and partners. It's something that we developed through partnership with the CT Incentive Grant support providers and our California Career Pathways Trust Consortium members. Ellen used a similar continuum, so I don't want to really go into detail. But to reiterate the important part of the slide, it's important that you begin with students learning about work and preparing students for work before they participate in an internship. We really need to know what students are interested in before we send them out. So one of my favorite exercises that I do, really when we're talking to students, especially ones that are new to our program, is actually have them sit down, give them about 2 or 3 minutes to write up as many careers as they can come up with. And I think you'd be surprised, even with actually adults. Usually the average is probably about maybe 20, maybe 30 if you're lucky. But the thing is really that students aren't aware of all the careers that are out there. So we really emphasize this awareness, this exploration, this research to make sure our students really know what they want to pursue. And so from that point, we actually really focus on the prep work. Again, we work with employers. Guest speakers would be in the first segment, but then that would transition to job shadowing. And actually, I'm going to turn things over to Doug Criddle here in a little bit. He'll talk about some of the things we do in class, not just outside of class, that reinforce some work-based learning across the board. So with that, Doug, would you like to take over, talk about some of the things we're doing in our program, some of the tools we're using, and some of the resources? Doug, are you there?
We currently use many integrated platform tools in the work-based learning continuum. One of the programs that we use is NEPRIS. NEPRIS is a visual platform that connects teachers and students with the right industry experts virtually without having to spend a lot of planning time or having to leave the classroom while they're providing an effective way for companies to extend their educational outreach and create and equity of access. This is a live two-way interaction between industry and students. Some of the benefits of NEPRIS that we found is it brings the classroom lessons to life, exposes students to STEM jobs, and inspires students through role models. This unique platform makes it possible for our students to meet and interact with real-life role models from the convenience of their own classrooms. Now, a recent example of one of the NEPRIS sessions that we just had a couple of weeks ago was with our adult ed, medical assistant, and vocational nursing programs. The students decided that they wanted to speak with a medical examiner in the field. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that might be kind of hard to find in your backyard. Well, prior to the session, the students and the instructor developed a set of questions to be asked along with defining student learning outcomes. So it was a team project with students and instructor. This integrated platform proved very successful for us because it increased student engagement, career awareness, and allowed students to meet and interact with real-life role models from the convenience of their own classrooms. Another tool that we utilize, that Eric mentioned previously, is Virtual Job Shadow and California Career Resource Network. These valuable tools are used to provide an in-depth career assessment profile of our students' interests. The platform houses thousands of up-to-date industry-based careers that are directly related to the student's assessment profile results. And the best part of this that we like the best is all activity on the student's end are tracked for data purposes. Now, we can all talk theory, and the hard part is when you're faced to implement it into your program. So we had a case study that we're working on, and it's called Introduction to Industrial Careers. We had this idea. The idea was to go directly to our local employers and partnership groups and jointly develop some student learning outcomes on a selected group of careers in our area, as well as introduce the students to a variety of careers in emerging industries. This buffet, if you will, this buffet of careers included welding, electrical, manufacturing, automotive, construction, and solar energy. The course was modular-based and hosted in a classroom as well as on-site employer lab settings. All of our instructors were local community college instructors in their own specialized industry field, along with employer instructors. The course was 12 weeks long, with very hands-on applications of tools and applied theory practices. Based upon the needs indicated from our employer partners, this is what they told us. We need shop math for our students, technical reading skills improved, essential soft skills and mock interviewing, and understanding of job work ethics. We integrated math through work-based learning projects. We actually placed a tape measure in the student's hand from day one, and every day during the class for 12 weeks long, they worked with a tape measure. Now let's talk about some of the results. The students earned 5 separate certificates: CPR, AED, career readiness, soft skills, as Eric indicated that we have criteria for, and also an OSHA 10 safety course, as well as a completion course certification. All students were CASAS pre- and post-tested for math and reading, and we have some amazing results to report today. For our culminating project, all students developed a work-based learning, career readiness, soft skills portfolio, and we developed initially from the project-based learning model from High Tech High in San Diego, and we had the students go out and determine what a local community need was. They found that there was a need for increase in literacy in community, so they built a project that would meet that need, and the project was called the Little Library. The students designed, fabricated an exterior book library and installed it in a park in their local neighborhood. One of the other big wins we got out of this program for results is 60% of all of our students actually left the course with a full-time employment job. I'm not even sure if there's any program that does that yet, but I know that we're working outside of the box, and what we're doing is working. So we're gonna keep doing what we're doing and refine and sharpen the knife as we go and make adjustments. Eric?
I think we're about out of freeze. but we'd like to turn things over to Frank from here.
Okay, so Eric and Doug, thank you for sharing what you're doing in your program in Sutter County, some great ideas that were shared and some great tools. We are going to move to Frank Gerdeman, who is from the Advanced Consortia with the Lake Tahoe Adult Education Consortia. Frank, I will turn it over to you. Thanks so much. I see a hand raised there, Estella. Estella, if you are able to type in your response, that would be great. If you have a question, please type it in. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Cerise. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Right, so now I have to meet the applause. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm going to be able to be just a little quicker because a lot of the things that we do here are very similar to what Eric and Doug were talking about. I do want to cover a couple of differences. One is that unlike a lot of the AEBG consortia in California, Tahoe really didn't have programming prior to the funding. So there was and still is no adult school in the community. There was very little non-credit adult education work being done at the college. So we've actually been able to build an integrated system and take an integrated approach sort of from the ground up in new construction versus remodeling or retooling. And I'll talk a little bit more in a slide or two on how that has included our employer engagement. I always like to start slides with the industries that are represented in Tahoe. It also gives us a chance to brag a little bit about living in one of many beautiful places in California. As you can imagine, tourism, recreation, culinary, hospitality are critical industries, and we actually have a large number of employer partners, not 800. I used to think our 45 or 50 was pretty good. Eric and Doug, that number is pretty impressive. We don't have any real single driving industry location. We have some larger partners, but again, it's the sector that's the big piece. So I'm going to cover a couple of the ways in which we address work-based learning. Some of it, I think, Ellen, you talked about in the continuum of work-based learning versus pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship, and I'll also talk about apprenticeship style approach, so apprenticeship with a small a, not a capital A. Of course, we have the 4-credit work-based learning work experience opportunities here at the college. It's available to the general student population. It's a fairly significant number of our face-to-face full-time equivalencies, but through the AEBG work and through the work of our network, we've really been able to add some targeted populations focusing on adults with disabilities through a partnership, much like it sounds like they have in Sutter County with the Department of Rehabilitation, and then dual enrollment for adult learners who are working in the adult diploma program with our County Office of Education. So whether they're 40 and in that program or they're 17 at the traditional high school, we give students the same opportunity in work experience for dual enrollment so that it counts toward their high school credential as well as earning college credit. One of the tools we use that I think is a little different perhaps from the career and personality assessments that Eric and Doug spoke about is a resource called Tradeify. If you're interested in learning more about it, please reach out to me. You'll see our contact information at the end. It's actually a photo-based assessment, and we found it to be really accessible for our non-native speakers and our adult with disability populations in a way that a lot of the text-based assessments haven't been historically. So we really are enjoying the implementation of that. It's not a free resource, so in full disclosure, there's a cost to it. We found that it's worth it. The other thing, much like Sutter County, we also have a heavy reliance on transition navigators through Advance, and their role is really to provide ongoing intensive support, planning support, and case management support across the variety of services and programs that our participants engage in. So we don't duplicate the work of a college counselor or a Department of Rehabilitation counselor or a CalFresh case manager, but we help the participants tie all of those pieces and hold all of those pieces together. We found that that's been really critical in our success for pathways planning and work-based learning. Some of the innovative opportunities, I mentioned the fact that we've really been able to engage our employers from the beginning and from the build out of our programming. So they really are much more co-owners and network members than partners or outreach. So we have been really successful in seeking their input on the on the design of programming and how we deliver the programming and what the expected outcomes and standards of that are. Ellen did a great job of identifying sort of common definition and industry needs as two of the pillars of this work. Common definition, having them from the beginning has been helpful. In terms of employability skills, we rely heavily on the New World of Work, 21st Century Employability Skills program that was developed through the Community College Chancellor's Office, and have found that to be helpful in our local community developing a common definition even around the soft skills or employability skills that we're talking about in our meetings. So we held a training and invited instructors, HR directors, general managers, frontline supervisors to be a part of a two-day event where everyone got walked through sort of becoming a certified teacher of those skills, which allows us to use the tools created by New World of Work for content and application competency of the 10 skills. One of the other things that's a little different here, I was glad to hear Eric and Doug talk about their close relationship with WIOA. Starting July 1st, our network actually becomes the provider of Title I services. The county decided to give it up for whatever reason because we're sort of isolated up here in the basin, especially in the winter, and we were able to step in. And so beginning July 1st, our staff person will be the Title I case manager, and we'll be able to do in-house referrals between the rest of our system and WIOA Title I access. I threw up apprenticeships because I think in addition to being a part of the continuum and having that very clear definition of structured employment and training, I also want to talk about the opportunities that it's giving us here in Tahoe to sort of change the culture around work-based learning, not only in the community, but I think or maybe more importantly in the college level. So we were fortunate enough to receive one of the $500,000 pre-apprenticeship grants last January. We've applied for an additional $460,000+ that will be announced on Friday. We hope we got it, but even if we didn't, our apprenticeship program will move forward. We had 16 properties sign on as sponsoring houses for a culinary apprenticeship, and that in part speaks to the fact that we don't have a single employer large enough to sustain a registered apprenticeship program alone. So we've been able to use our partnerships and our network to get our industry partners to work more closely together and begin to collaborate versus compete. So the mindset in Tahoe has really shifted from Restaurant A competing with Restaurant B to South Lake Tahoe competing with Vail and Monterey and Whistler, and the ever-growing litany or number of Vail resorts. We have a targeted cohort start in January 2019. The college is going to provide the RSI, roughly 200 hours per year in our model, and instead of building RSI or RTI-related training and instruction specifically for the apprentices, we actually took the existing culinary coursework and aligned that to the American Culinary Federation standards and requirements. So the college is able to deliver its for-credit content and have it count as the specific RTI RSI for the apprentices. One of the hopes is that we will be able to move toward this idea, the last bullet on the slide, is this idea of work-based college content credit, so that instead of an elective credit for work-based learning, which is what typically happens, a student who's working 40 or 50 hours or is an apprentice 40 or 50 hours a week in a working kitchen with a certified chef who's supervising the same skills and student learning outcomes, maybe they don't have to find another 10 or 12 hours to take Culinary 102. They'll be able to either test out or be considered co-enrolled in that class on the work site. That's still conceptual, but I think it's one of the opportunities that capital A apprenticeship and lowercase apprenticeship model approaches bring to our work. On that note, I'll just share some numbers I heard yesterday. Excuse me, it's very dry up here. Apprentices and apprenticeship approaches to learning currently have about the same value in the general public's mind as a four-year college and community colleges in terms of learning experiences. And that's really important. I would love to see the numbers for a community college and college faculty, how they view apprentices, but at the general public level, apprentices and that model of learning is considered as valuable as four-year and two-year colleges. The other thing is that there's a fairly high percentage of the general public, it's roughly 65 to 68%, who would support additional government funding to support an apprenticeship approach to learning. And I think that means we're going to have some really exciting opportunities to think about expanding, deepening the role of work-based learning through that continuum of pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship over the next 1 to 3 years. And I believe, Cherise, that concludes my portion of the show.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful, Frank. Thank you so much. We are going to have some time at the end for a few questions and answers, but we'll move right along with hearing from Hayden Springer, who is from the Foundation for California Community Colleges. Hayden.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Hayden Springer, and I'm with the Foundation for California Community Colleges. Just a little bit of background on us. We were established in 1998 as the official auxiliary for the California Community College Board of Governors and the Chancellor's Office. So we are entering our 20th year of service. And as you can see here, our mission suggests that our work is largely driven by the priorities of the community college system. However, we do also work very closely with partners in the K-12 space as well as the public workforce system in these 5 areas that you see. And I'm in the workforce development space, and so our primary focus there is really about helping build the system capacity to increase that access to quality work-based learning because, you know, we know that it supports both that technical and employability skills development, but research and practice now also shows that it can have a very positive impact on student achievement and other types of achievement, and for all learners really starting to break through some of those equity and social mobility barriers that certainly exist. And so a number of the presenters have shown different versions of the work-based learning continuum. I'm excited to see that at least the phasing and titling is the same. And so what we've done at the foundation is develop a number of resources to try to support learners that are going through that entire process. So, you know, just a few of them that we have is Here to Career, which is it's a mobile app that helps students become aware of career and education options, and it's based on your geolocation. And it is available in both English and Spanish. We also have a work-based learning management platform called Career XP. Some of you may have heard of it as a Launchpath as well in the workforce space. And that is helping manage and account for different types of work-based learning activities, all the way from a classroom presentation through paid internships, really helping all of the users manage and account for that process. And where I'm going to focus in just a minute is on our Career Catalyst Employer of Record service. So when we're thinking about paid work experience, there are really these 6 elements we think about that make it valuable. So you're seeing here, you've got students, host employers, funding, employer of record, contracting entity, and program management. Often the biggest thing that we hear is that, you know, the major hurdle for paid work experience is finding employers that are willing to take on the administrative burden and the liability associated with offering that temporary paid work experience. So that's where the foundation steps in to serve as an employer of record. In the simplest of terms, participants are placed on the foundation's payroll, and then we provide all of the back office support and to program managers and the participants, such as timekeeping assistance, tax setup, workers' compensation, and so forth. And that really allows the employer or host site to focus on providing that high-quality experience. So just to give you a sense of the impact of the program, in 2017 alone, we served 52 clients, and that was across K-12, colleges, public agencies, our workforce intermediary partners, as well as a number of individual private companies. And our impact in terms of participants served, the hours worked, and the wages is quite significant, and it continues to grow year over year. And so over on the right, you can see just a few examples of where we have experienced some success, and that's across, as I mentioned, multiple spaces that support work-based learning and our students at any stage in their learning. So we have a little bit of time, so I wanted to share with you just 2 examples of how this is working. And what we're really excited about most recently is being able to accommodate apprenticeship with this service. So this first one you see here, it's a brand new program supported by IQMS, and that's a software company that's based down in Paso Robles, a partnership with the SLO County Office of Education, as well as SLO Partners, which is it's a spin-off of the County Office of Education that is specifically focused on career readiness and college preparation in the region. So we've started this group out with 3 apprentices, and they are considered full-time employees, and they receive all of the benefits that your traditional foundation employee receives. And then the last one I would share with you is a really wonderful partnership we've had for quite a while with the U.S. Forest Service and Feather River College. Each summer they take on anywhere between 30 to 40 paid interns. And the biggest hurdle for the Forest Service is that, as you can imagine, the red tape associated with hiring through the federal government, especially for short-term work, can be so overwhelming. So we're able to largely cut those issues out, and they work quite a significant amount. And that is also coupled with a course that is focused on the new world of work, top 10 21st century skills. So this is a really great example of how classroom learning and instruction on those employability skills is directly tied to a work-based learning experience. And I guess I would just close with looking forward. You know, this program, it's been around as long as the foundation has been in one form or another. We've supported over 10,000 participants to date. And the nature of our partnerships and the size of programs is just continuing to diversify and grow. So we're always exploring different options about how we can expand it to meet more students and different types of learners across California. So with that, I would turn it back over to our facilitators.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hayden, thank you for highlighting what you've been doing and the great experiences of your students who've been able to get into work-based learning programs through your work and your leadership. I want to thank the participants for hanging in there with us. We are close to the end of our webinar, but we want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have, share any comments, any thoughts that you have for us as we prepare to wrap the webinar up. But if you have any questions, please feel free to type those right into the general chat pod off to your left. I see a few of you typing, and we will wait for your questions to come in. And as they come in, I will ask one of the facilitators to respond. Thank you. So the first question, how do the programs handle undocumented immigrants? So I'll leave that to Eric, Doug, or Frank.
So this is Frank. Here we sort of take a non-credit approach through the college with undocumented students in terms of the career exploration, all of the services that don't require a Social Security number we provide to any student regardless of residency status. The reality in a resort community like this is that a number of undocumented residents are also employed, and so in those cases we will work with the employer versus some of our more traditional government partners to make sure that we're providing a similar experience and that there's similar educational value to the work that's being done.
Great, thank you so much for that. Anyone else want to add to that?
Sharice, this is Eric. Similar to Frank, we have a pretty large population in our ESL program, and we do a lot of the work-based learning here in class. We work directly with our one-stops and other partners to make sure we serve those students and provide the career technical education and training and work directly with some of our employers. So it's kind of a fine line, but we continue to serve those students.
Great. Wonderful. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. Again, I want to thank you for being with us this afternoon. I hope that this 90 minutes was of great value to you and that you've learned a great deal more about work-based learning and specifically what we're doing throughout the consortia in California. We hope that you will join us in the future for our future webinars. But if you have questions that do come up in the interim for any of the facilitators that you heard from today, this final slide shares their contact information with you, the emails that are there. You can download this PowerPoint as well so that you have that information with you. Veronica has typed in the link to register for future webinars, and she will be sending you, along with the evaluation, the handout that Doug and Eric have for you on the Continuum that they're using. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the afternoon. We look forward to seeing you again in a future webinar. All right. I see folks typing. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sharice. I will now close out the webinar. Once I close it, the evaluation will appear on your screen. Please be sure to fill it out so that we can give all of our facilitators your feedback and let them know what you thought about today's presentation. Everyone have a great evening, and we will see you all next week for our educational technology webinars. Have a great day.